Welcome to eCommerce Deep Dive, the show where we explore e-commerce business strategy and the future of shopping online. Your host is John Ghiorso, founder and CEO of Orca Pacific, a full-service agency dedicated to growing brands on Amazon. Every week, John talks shop with the biggest players in retail and e-commerce. Today's episode is Rethinking the Future of Retail and E-commerce. This episode was originally recorded during our eCommerce Deep Dive Live series. John is joined by Catherine Marshall of Reebok, Michael Zakkour of 5 New Digital, and Sri Rajagopalan from ZenFuel. The experts talk about the future of online retail and different consumer trends that have evolved since COVID-19. They discuss what will happen to physical retail and how brands can take advantage. We hope you enjoy the show.
My name is John Ghiorso. I'm the founder and CEO of Orca Pacific. For those of you who don't know, we are a full-service agency with an exclusive focus on Amazon. We've been doing this about 12 years and recently announced that we will be merging with Mighty Hive and S4. With that, Catherine, why don't we start with you?
Sure. My name is Catherine Marshall. I have been with the Reebok brand for about 15 years. Funny story, the day that I started was the day that Adidas had acquired us. So I called HR and said, should I come in? Prior to that, I was in CPG, but through the years at Reebok, I've predominantly been in the sales function with a 3-year stint in business development global, looking after how to become really the best fitness brand and what's the evolution in the future of fitness. And then I went back into sales to focus on digital. So I oversee right now the digital marketplace strategy as it pertains to our brand and all of our wholesalers, as well as a P&L for direct pure players. So that would be Amazon, amongst many others.
Awesome. Thanks, Catherine. Michael?
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Zakkour, and I'm the founder of a company called 5 New Digital. I'm going to date myself horribly here, but I've been actually working in the web world and e-commerce since 1994. So I'm an old guy. I go all the way back to really the birth of Web 1.0 and came to retail in a reverse way. I came at it from the digital world first and then had to learn about physical and all the other things that happen in retail. But another kind of lightning strike moment for me was 18 years ago. I went to China and I laid down some roots there as well and created several companies as China was rising in the economic sense and the political, cultural sense worldwide. But the most important thing was I spent the last 16 of those 18 years working with brands and retailers from around the world in engaging the the digital domains in China, Asia Pacific. So essentially, 5 New Digital is 60% of our business is working with domestic US and European brands on digital transformation, what we call the new retail model and unified commerce. And then about 40% of my business is still working with brands and retailers on engaging Asian consumers through digital means.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael, and thanks for being here. Shri, last but not least.
25 years in CPG, most of the time was spent various functions and locations of PepsiCo, then Johnson & Johnson consumer. I've even done a year of pharma and medical devices working across senators and lobbyists and things like that, believe it or not, having conversations about how digital will change patient healthcare to self-care, which I'm sure none of you care about today on this call, but actually does impact your life in some strange, wicked way. And then at Revlon, Elizabeth Arden, I was 15 years hardcore brick and mortar trained coming from a DSD ecosystem. I've even once run a route in South Dallas. That means driving a truck for Frito, the translation. And the last 10 years have been exclusively e-com. Started, launched, scaled e-com first for Frito in the PepsiCo ecosystem, then for Johnson & Johnson consumer, and then for Revlon, Elizabeth Arden. In the process, touched every corner from B2B for professionals and for distribution gains to D2C for many brands, Neutrogena, Rogaine, Elizabeth Arden, Johnson's Baby, you kind of name it. Obviously the Amazon 1P, 3P, done 3P the easy way, which is make Andrew Vaginis at PharmaPacks your best friend, and then learn trip and then try to do in-house fulfillment yourself, which in large organizations is a different ballgame. So virtually every corner, omni-channel, you name it, done the NACDSs, things of that nature. March of this year, decided to brave it out, start my own supplements company with the co-founder. So I'm co-founder of a supplement startup, ZenFuel, which actually launches September 6th. And that's why I have a white background, because we're actually in the office this week in crunch mode. But I'm also have a indie record label called Mischief Records. Check that out. And in real estate in Texas. So I do a bunch of things.
Hey everyone, John Ghiorso here. I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. I wanted to let you know that this episode has been brought to you by Orca Pacific, the agency I founded to help brands succeed on the Amazon platform. If you need any services that relate to success on the platform, whether it be content, advertising, SEO, help on the back end when it comes to operational support, etc., feel free to reach out to our team. The best way to get in touch with us is on LinkedIn. And with that, we'll get back to the show. Okay, great. So, I'd like to start with a question and maybe go kind of round robin on this, because I think you'll all have interesting opinions. And I'm actually going to play devil's advocate on this one a little bit. So we all know the story of COVID's impact on e-commerce, obviously massive share shift, massive gains. I think we're all pretty biased towards digital. So I want to kind of maybe I'll ask it in a devil's advocate way, but consumers have been forced into e-commerce adoption, either because literally stores have been closed or because they don't want to get sick and die going to a physical store. So why do you think, if you do, why do you think that adoption will stay? Why is there staying power? Why is there stickiness to that? Why won't we have a vaccine in, whenever, April of next year? Why won't everyone just go back to the way that they were doing things before? Maybe Michael, let's start with you.
Sure. I think it's important to understand the framework, and we all kind of, I think, come from the same view here too, is we've entered a world where retail, consumption, commerce in general has entered the digital commerce age, right? So I'm loath now to even use the word e-commerce, because I view e-commerce as one habitat, one location in a larger digital commerce ecosystem. And, my view is that there are 7 mega ecosystem builders out there today, one of them being Amazon, others including Alibaba, Walmart, Target, Rakuten in Japan, Mercado Libre. You're gonna end up with about 10, what we call apex predators in the retail world, that are vying for every moment, every dollar, every service, every function to make it a completely inclusive environment, right? And we know that this works because we already have proof of it coming out of China, where Alibaba and JD and Tencent have built these massive multifunctional ecosystems that are powered by the whole reason I call my company 5 New, the new consumption, new retail, new supply chain, new technology, and new finance, right? So I think what most people have done is they've been shoved into this world of digital commerce, where everything in the mega ecosystems and the mega processes of making, moving, selling, marketing products and services of all kinds is the new normal. What I think we've just seen is that COVID-19 has been the great accelerator and has probably, moved 3 years worth of that development into about 6 months. That being said, a key idea around the idea of unified commerce is the complete integration of online, offline technology and logistics for that whole new. And physical retail still matters. So I think what we're going to see is people are going to have a more digital consumer experience, whether in the store or at home or on the app. Stores still matter.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. Interesting. Catherine, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So a couple things that Michael said. Stores absolutely still matter. The human touch still matters. He mentions a really key word, which is ecosystem, which is these environments, and the 7 mega ecosystem builders is, those are platforms for consumers to really live. And so this subscription kind of model where you're just getting that loyalty and you're getting that revenue from the consumer, and the consumer is like, you know what, I trust you. And now that I've bought digitally, I feel okay about it. And I also have a suite of other services, and that's why I'm paying the money to subscribe and be loyal. Footwear has been interesting because now what we've seen in our industry is, you know, it's much easier to try on a pair of shoes, send it back, etc. So that the stickiness factor is there. Where I'm going with this when it pertains to ecosystems is what happened in the pandemic. This is going to tie into Michael's earlier point that there is still a need for physical, is in fitness. So we all saw this necessity to work out at home. And so dumbbells were all of a sudden a commodity. Like you could not find dumbbells anywhere. It was like toilet paper. Still, actually. You know, but what I've seen is more and more that almost like a fragmentation or decentralization of fitness in itself, and that brick and mortar is going online. And so now consumers are getting that experience in a different kind of ecosystem. And I'm going to tie back to something like Peloton, where they have an ecosystem where they're providing services, they're providing this live, social, human experience. And I do think that that is such a need, and that has shown that the need for human is very much there. Now, where fitness goes, I still think there's going to be a need for brick and mortar because people just want that community. From a retail lens, that's the exact same concept. People want to go touch and feel, and they want to try on a pair of sneakers, and they want to see how they look. So I think that, you know, why the stickiness factor? Because there is comfort level now. There are these ecosystems that can provide almost this human touch, and that will provide other services and products. And so I think that people are just getting much more comfortable. Even the generations who were very, very, very nervous to even, you know, order online for anything. You know, my parents, 74 years old, are now online everything.
Yeah. So maybe to paraphrase a little bit, so you think that some of those things that kept people in physical environments are now being kind of better replicated online, and so there's a more organic kind of natural shift as those experiences online better replicate physical world.
Yes. Yep. But I do think that, to Michael's point, when things start opening up, there is going to be a stickiness factor on those online experiences. But I do think that there will still be a need for that human socialization. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sri, what are your thoughts?
So John, I'm going to jump right into the data.
Sure.
And, you know, there's a piece of data that McKinsey put out. I think it's been a week and a half, and it's circulated everything from Instagram to every social channel possible on planet Earth. I won't be surprised if it's even on TikTok. But McKinsey estimated that, you know, since the internet revolution took off, which is really the e-com revolution, mid-2000s or so, well before the stock market crash of 2009, e-commerce's penetration, or digital sales, digital retail's penetration of total retail has been about 1% of growth year over year. So if you look back, you know, 15 years, pretty flat. It's been about digital retail's penetration at the beginning of 2020 was about 15% of all retail. In the pandemic, as all of y'all have already mentioned it multiple times, people right now have no choice but to shop online because death is a leveler. No one wants to die, and you don't want to go and get sick and die. Pretty straightforward. But it's jumped all the way from 15 to about 37.5, tending more towards the 40 range. Traditionally, what analysts would tell you based on historical evaluation, trends, patterns, the 2020 forecast would have been 16%, but we're looking at 37.5. Now, when a vaccine is released, I think there's one major difference this time versus traditionally vaccines for other disease need states. I think it's an election year. There's a lot of rhetoric around the country, whether we want to accept it. There are political biases. Are vaccines good for you, bad for you? Do we trust it? There are all kinds of treatments being suggested that half the country wants it, half the country doesn't want it. I don't personally forecast a crazy run to the doctor, get a vaccine for such a large portion of the country to deliver a level of comfort zone that'll help people go back in the mass droves, at least in the eastern seaboard or the western seaboard, which is like the largest population sets in our country. But if you look at the pure numbers, if it's 37 and a half, and we get some sense of life is starting to steady itself and we're able to go outside and do our steady activities again. New York City announced today that schools can open in the fall full time. That is a giant leap of faith and a giant announcement for the entire country, because if you can do that in such a densely populated environment, surely Georgia can, and surely Kentucky can, and everyone, Texas can, and everyone else can. So there's some positivity there. So some of that will return. But as Michael and Catherine have pointed out, a certain group of shoppers who never really took to the internet and digital retail shopping as any means or mechanism in the past have for the first time said, I can click a button and in a couple clicks, actually on Amazon, single click buying, I can complete the transaction and it just shows up a couple of days later and the supply chain is fairly smoothless. A lot of naysayers are going to agree Amazon hasn't been the best at delivery. Yeah, of course. But for the most part, if you look at the 80-20 rule, 80% of the time you're getting your 2-day fulfillment. And all of a sudden, Amazon's not the only one in the game, which it felt like for most of my 8-9 years leading e-commerce. Omnichannel has stepped up in a big way. And that's really click and collect. I won't say home delivery. Instacart is growing gangbusters. And that's a word that practitioners like me in the industry knew who Instacart was and were partnering. But for majority of the consumers, 200 million consumers, the penetration was like close to, if you looked at percentage points, nothing. And Instacart's penetration now in consumer shopping is 5%, which is a lot of consumers. A lot of those things are going to be sticky. There's a word that goes around, the retail apocalypse. Traditionally, I would be the first one to tell you, remove it from your dictionary and throw that in the garbage can. But as I'm looking at store closure after store closure, I think one that was very close to home for me was the Lord & Taylor announcement from last week. I don't know if y'all saw it. Yeah. Lord & Taylor hits closer to home for me because personally, it's the first luxury store I ever walked inside in the United States 30 years ago. And seeing it closed, seeing the announcement for bankruptcy and the closure of X 100 stores, et cetera, and start tallying number after number after number, I think I'll personally be doing the industry a disfavor if I don't start agreeing to some degree there is a retail apocalypse upon us. Does it mean food and bev grocery stores, aka the giant retailer Walmart, is going to close 700 stores because of the internet? Absolutely not. Does it mean Kroger is going to go out of business? Hell no. And so food and bev, grocery, fast moving consumer enjoys a very different penetration in the US for in-store versus many other categories. So I'd say, yeah, there is a retail apocalypse upon us, depending on what category you do your business in. If you're in fast moving consumer goods, the notion of a store experience via digital mechanisms is not that high a requirement as it is in, say, what Catherine does, which is in the athletic ecosystem, where a retail apocalypse generally means a retail footprint is shipping from picking, packing, buying in store to more user experience, more like the Apple model. But will the store ecosystem vanish in its entirety? Never. Not in the United States of America.
Super interesting, and I'm glad you brought up some of that data. So I'll dig into that a little more and maybe ask for a prediction here. So just to clarify, so this year e-commerce was about 16%, and it was adding about 1% a year. So on that same trajectory, next year would be 17, 2022 would be 18%, and that lines up with my experience. It's 37%. I understand that it probably won't be as black and white as we have a vaccine and everything's over and we all go back to normal. So I get that. But hypothetically, when COVID is kind of, effectively done, it is no longer a big impact in our lives. Say that's a year from now, where does that 37 settle? Does it settle back on 17 instead of 16 or 18, or does it settle at 35? We're going to ask for a crystal ball here, but.
Yeah, I think the word that's floating around in the industry, which I would wholeheartedly agree with, is if you're 37 and a half versus 15 is about 22 and a half years of growth. If you just did the percentage point theory, I think it's closer to the retail industry has grown and matured about 10 years and 6 months. So that's closer to, if it is 15, which is the number we have, it's probably going to settle at 25. But what I would try to direct people's attention on, especially if you're coming from a CPG brand and a company, And of course, if you're a retailer, but you have different opportunities depending on what you represent. You're either a brand P&L owner or you're a retail fulfillment owner at the end of the day. You're closer to the shopper. Is if you're a brand P&L, if you're in the branding ecosystem, doesn't matter what your role is, supply chain, P&L, really don't care. If you have 1/4 of your business is directly anchored, aka the 25%, to a digital backed retail footprint selling is the word that comes to mind, aka e-commerce. For the first time, and I've been at very large P&Ls and presented to who's who in boardrooms, but for the first time in the last 3-6 months, people I talked to, senior leadership, aka the CEO and the chief sales officer, the president of blah, 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 the CMO for the first time is really taking a deeper dive into what's my Amazon business. It's not that rounding error 3% of the entire ecosystem. So, and to be transparent, words that used to float around, why do I care? Is it really going to make a dent in the business? It's more a must-have versus and then a nice-to-have versus a must-have. And I got to do Amazon because it's where search happens. All that rhetoric is evaporating fast. And if it's 1/4 of your business, that's the projection for where it settles. You no longer have a choice.
Yeah.
You need to know, if you're a CMO, you need to know what a PIM is. I'm sorry to say it. You need to know it. You need to know the difference between an SEO and SEM. And you got to be able to debate your agency down to the SKU ASIN level. I'm going to use words on Amazon just because they're easy, not to be misinterpreted that Amazon is the only engine. Amazon only represents 1/3 of all e-com.
Sure.
Click and collect is here to stay in a big way for fast moving consumer goods. That's your Walmart, Targets, even the CVS's, Walgreens, and not to forget your super regionals like HEB, Mars. They're really good at click and collect and digital. To me, the biggest attention where FMCG should be paying is in the click and collect space. And I'll close it out with a simple reason for that. Brands really wake up every day and worry about delivering a brand P&L. They haven't really focused on the digital retail ecosystem because if you look at a P&L, it's going to automatically dilute it because they've relied on a retailer to take care of that at wafer thin margins. So e-commerce is a holdback for every large scale brand for a reason, not because they don't like it. It's for the millennial generation. It's because it's a brand P&L changer. But when it's 25% of your business and you know it's going to hit upon you, the best place to place a bet without over diluting your P&L is rely on the amazing partnerships you established with your brick and mortar partners and extend it into digital retail. And brands will do that in a big way. There was hesitancy with Amazon. There was hesitancy in D2C because they changed the P&L in other ways.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think when you do see that shift in terms of importance, it doesn't go from number 25 on the list to number 18 on the list. It goes from number 25 to number 1 on the list for the leadership team, which is obviously it's not just the percentages. It goes from kind of niche to one of our most important channels of focus. And maybe the entire growth engine for a lot of these fast-moving consumer brands. So, Sri, that's great. Michael, I wanted to maybe along these same lines ask you a question. We've had conversations before, and you've really interestingly presented what's happening in China in some ways as kind of a look into the future of commerce. It'd be great if you could just maybe opine on kind of what's like not even COVID impact, but just over the last couple of years, what has happened with China? I hesitate even to say e-commerce or omni-channel, but you can explain kind of this fully integrated digital concept. Do you see that as a view into the future of what will eventually happen in the US? And just if you could go into that.
Already happening, right?
Yeah.
So what a lot of people don't fully understand is that China and large chunks of Japan and South Korea and Southeast Asia, but especially China, are somewhere between 3 and 4 years ahead of where the West is on what we call unified commerce and new retail, right? So they're operating their consumers, their technology companies, and their marketplaces, with maybe the exception of Amazon, they're all operating at a graduate school degree level. And most Western brands, companies, and consumers are still at the high school level. The difference is that stark. And so the roadmap for most of what is happening now and most of what's been accelerated over the last 6 months actually came out of China, okay? And so this is where, I learned over the years, omni-channel is a zombie concept. There are few words in the retail lexicon I can't stand more than omni-channel, because omni-channel is simply a vague word that describes a vague attempt to connect your business channels and your items and your businesses. And it's just not how the world works anymore, right? The way the world works is you have these giant mega ecosystem builders, but the good news as an individual brand or a smaller brand or super regional, whoever you are, you have the opportunity to build your own ecosystem, right? So the name of the game is, what is your offensive and defensive strategy for the major ecosystems? And then how do you build your own scaled version of that? Okay, so what we've seen come out of China is it's really, number one for me is the concept of unified commerce, okay? They were willing before anybody else, right to Sri's point, people were choking on how it changes their P&L. I've been knocking on doors at D2C companies, at CPG and FMCG companies for many years, pushing for adoption of unified commerce and digital first, with some success and a lot of resistance, okay? So unified commerce is, you're saying, like Alibaba, look where Alibaba put all of their money in the last 5 years. They put it into department stores, convenience stores, wine shops, services, right? They didn't say we need to build 5 more Tmalls. So they've done this complete integration of online and offline driven by the tech. That's the future that was built there that's accelerating here. And what does that mean for the consumer, right? Ultimately, what does that mean for the consumer? It's about delivering what we call the 4 C's, right? Always consumer centricity. Amazon does that very well. Convenience, allowing them the opportunity to contribute to the brand, right? And to customize. That's what unified commerce does. So actually about a month from now, I'm launching a new technology in North America called Proximus. And Proximus, our key feature is what we call our flying shopping cart. Literally, it's a shopping cart that flies from your website to a big retailer's website to your app, and all of the shopping is done in one single shopping cart and one flow of information that the store operators, the clerks, everything happens on that one flying cart. That's what the consumer wants, right? That's centristic. So these are the things that China's done 4 years ago. 4 years ago. So it's really this unified commerce, new retail ecosystem model. And if you look at Starbucks today, they'll tell you half of what we learned in the last 3 years that we implemented here, we learned in China, and over, you have all these examples. So I think number one is the unified commerce model and the complete integration with online, offline.
Are there any examples of that in the U.S. happening today? That Americans living in the U.S., not traveling to China, not experiencing this for themselves, would have experienced and go, oh, okay, that at scale makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, some of the other right. So, when Instagram finally got around to being able to link to product pages and buy things directly, this was hailed as some great innovation in the arrival of social commerce in America. JD and Tencent have been selling through social commerce on WeChat and all the other platforms. So I think people are starting to feel more of that social impact, social commerce. I think that's developing. I think also if you look at a great example would be all the D2C companies, prior to the last 6 months, who are now moving towards what? Opening stores, right? And so Allbirds opening stores, Warby Parker opening stores. You go down the list of all the original D2C companies said, wow, this is the dirty little secret is you can only scale so far as a D2C company. And if you don't start opening physical environments and also serving the retail market, you're going to have a very hard time going from 150 million to $1.5 billion in sales. That's just the truth of it. The other dirty truth of it is, and here's anathema, I'm sure to anybody who's listening, in general, e-commerce is a kind of a crappy financial model. If you're just doing e-commerce, there are very few companies who can make a real go at it and make significant profit from e-commerce, right? That's just the financial truth of it. Whether it's the supply chain and logistics costs, cost of acquisition, paying $3 for every one consumer you bring onto the site. So with very few exceptions, it's a terrible business model. It's the business model I love, but it's a terrible business model. It's only when you get that full integration and approach it as unified commerce, that's what's grown the mega ecosystems, their approach to that. And Walmart and Target are right up there. They're on board. I love the Target app. It's one of my favorite retail apps in the world.
Awesome. That's great. So switching gears a little bit, Catherine, what are your thoughts on marketplaces and kind of where they're headed?
Yeah, it's a great question. One thing that I have seen in our industry is a louder chatter of marketplaces coming up. So niche marketplaces, so I'll reference in our industry, it's Goat and StockX. New one that just launched called the Yes, which is an app, shoppable app, created by the founder of Stitch Fix. What you're seeing is the emergence of more marketplaces, not to necessarily compete with the mega ones, right? But to offer their niche consumer more and to get that loyalist, get that subscription. So even what we've seen through this, from sales to subscription models were almost COVID proof, because you have the loyalty within that. You have a touch point. It's this full service. So service and product are key to continue in these marketplaces. And why do you keep coming back? Well, because you're liking what you get. And what I'm seeing is a really fast evolution of technology to personalize and to make everything exactly what you want. Actually, scarily so. So whether or not these marketplaces are for consumers, buyers, sellers, I'm going to put them all into the same kind of bucket. They're there to provide preferences, and preferences, be it price, be it style, be it brand. And so I think a lot of opportunities for brands to expand their channels of distribution are on these marketplaces, because these marketplaces and these ecosystems are going to get a very loyal consumer and these eyeballs for brands. And so I think there's an evolution also for brands to understand more about that consumer. I know we had spoken about it earlier, but the faster brands are to be nimble to the consumer's needs. And one thing that COVID has shown is that consumers don't know what they need until they need it. And then the entire brands have to completely redo their product portfolio. We joked around that deodorant sales were way down, right? But is there a stickiness factor in consumers' consumption, right? Like, are they like, I don't really wear makeup anymore, who cares? But I think that that's becoming more natural, right? Like, I don't get my nails done anymore. All right, that's awesome. I'm saving so much money, and I'm probably not going to go back, right? So I think brands need to be nimble in their product evolution. But what they're going to do is they're going to get on these marketplaces to learn more and to integrate and to get in front of brands. So I think that's happening. I think it's happening in every industry, not just fashion, to be honest. I'm just exposed to the fashion world and the creep up of a ton of these sticky marketplaces coming up.
So there's this kind of fragmentation then and specialization of all these different marketplaces. I think StockX is a good example, because it's just such kind of a unique concept that is probably tough for Amazon or one of the big kind of everything to everybody marketplaces to knock off. But that being said, competing with Amazon, or Walmart for that matter, is always a dangerous thing.
Mm-hmm.
As Amazon sees these kind of the channel of more niche marketplaces potentially in aggregate becoming a real competitor to them, they will compete. We know that. Will these guys just get crushed by Amazon 2 or 3 years from now? And if not, like why? Like, do you think they can kind of maintain relevance, even if they may not take over the world, but, run a very kind of profitable, relevant business?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I think Amazon has tried to figure out fashion for a very long time. They've tried to figure out drops, launch product. Hey, can we take a PDP up 24 hours and then take it down? They can't figure it out.
Yeah.
So I do think that these in the fashion world, I think that Amazon doesn't win, because I don't think brands are going to. I think brands are going to recognize that their consumer that they want for this niche product, that's high end, et cetera, is all over these niche platforms. I don't know if the trust for Amazon will be there unless there is some way for Amazon to figure out getting all brands in. And I don't see a world where Nike's going to give them Jordan product.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So, and I mean, we, like, Bezos always says this, and I think it's true. There's going to be multiple winners, but basically, you think these kind of niche marketplaces can continue. They have a pretty significant kind of differentiators and walls that they've been able to build. Just diving into your comment.
John,
yeah, go ahead.
To me, that to answer that question, will Amazon crush them, and will those marketplaces be less relevant in the ecosystem and vanish after a few years? I would redirect our attention a little bit to human attention spans and more in the marketing world than the digital retail world alone only. What's happened in COVID, we tend to focus on the e-commerce because it's the aspect many of us have grown up in, and that was our primary focus. How do we grow the number? How do we do that profitably? How do we gain distribution? But the bigger change, I would say, that's happened in the last 6 months is human attention today is almost getting close to exclusively digital, because you're simply not going into the brick and mortar footprint. Now, of course, we've already declared some of that will come back, but I talk of attention as where do you browse? Where do you search? Where do you hunt for bargains? Where do you hunt for deals? Where do you get your promo material? Me, at my ripe old age, for the first time in history, looks for my CVS coupons and religiously uses the CVS app to get my deals, and I'm actually using CVS's loyalty program for the first time. Not that a sample of one means anything, but I'm willing to bet there's hundreds and thousands like me in the same ecosystem. And I feel attention has now shifted online. And the big difference between marketing offline and online is offline, there are a handful of platforms. Online, there are thousands of platforms. And when a human, a shopper, a consumer goes and finds a niche need, like Catherine has pointed in a certain platform, Amazon will all of a sudden no longer be competing with the Walmarts and a handful of retailers of the world to build that muscle power and clout. They'll be competing. They will find themselves in the disadvantaged position for the first time of competing in 1,000 places. Amazon's traditional muscle power has been using technology to, for lack of a better word, exploit the weaknesses of large retailers. But if human attention is shifting to 1,000 spots, Amazon has its own dilemma to solve in the first place. And I don't think the role of the way to solve that dilemma of how do you get attention from 1,000 onto Amazon is that easy. The second thing is you have to look at the data again. I think a fact that the industry doesn't really talk much about, just because, again, convenience, because the Amazon 1P business model is just easy for brands, because it, believe it or not, it actually mirrors your Walmart offline ecosystem. There you can have JBPs, you can have QBRs, you negotiate a co-op, a trade rate. So the Amazon 1P no matter who says what to me, is not radically different from your in-store business model. The metrics and the consumer causals are different. The flywheel is different, but the ecosystem of negotiation and a partnership is the same. But your 3P on Amazon is larger than its 1P business. And Amazon already has such a scale in that 3P business model that going and fighting in 30 and 1,000 other ecosystems, financially and strategy-wise, probably don't make a lot of sense. I'm learning myself now what the economics of operating on a Amazon 3P business model are. It's an incredibly profitable business model for Amazon, focused on fast-moving consumer goods. That's the niche and specialty of the Amazon 3P ecosystem, to build subscription so that it comes with its penny profit that multiplies by scale. All of a sudden, you try to compete with a fashion niche 3P pure play marketplace, I'm sorry, you're completely topsy-turning your whole mission and strategy for what you wrote that marketplace to look like and feel. And if you have to do it in other categories, electronics, whole different ballgame. What the type of user experience you have to set up to compete in a marketplace that tends to be B2B anchored. So I don't see Amazon, because of an already existing scale and a very profitable ecosystem that it has, trying to take on 1,000 of these marketplaces. Now, will the 1,000 of these marketplaces be an Amazon killer? I'll tell you, if I flip to the other side, no. There's a role for those 1,000 marketplaces. And what it is that difference in that 15% to 25%. I think contrary to popular benefit, Amazon's not going to be the only beneficiary. Omni-channel is going to be some of the beneficiary. I know Michael doesn't like the word, but here in the brand ecosystem P&L, that's the only word we use, and no. And retailers love that word for some strange reason. Unified commerce is probably the right English Webster's dictionary word, but marketplaces will be a beneficiary for sure. It'll be like nickel and diming 1,000 of those, gaining 0.1 points each, and they'll have it all.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if you bring it back to, Amazon's model from the beginning and still is price, convenience, selection. A consumer going to StockX, well, they don't care about price. I mean, maybe they do in some way, but they're certainly not looking for the lowest price, because if they were, they wouldn't be buying a $300 pair of, limited edition sneakers to begin with. Selection, arguably that there's selection that isn't available elsewhere, but they're not just looking for the world's largest selection of, $60 running shoes either. So it's interesting that, for the majority of kind of purchases, I think, for the majority of consumers, price, convenience, and selection, that gets them there. Like, that's what they want. That's what Walmart provided and still does as really a disruptor. They did it better than anyone else. Now Amazon arguably does, is always going to be there, but there's always these kind of other consumer experiences that they look for that will fall out, Sri, to your point, fall outside of the scope of that model. And if they do, I think historically Amazon's had a tough time kind of breaking into those different sort of consumer behavior mindsets. Catherine, you mentioned this, but Amazon has launched all these initiatives over the last couple of years in sort of these small test attempts to go beyond just purely, the biggest kind of grouping of low price, fashion products. The drop, you could probably name a dozen of them. They're continuing to roll these things out. I mean, do you think they ever kind of win on one of these? Because right now, Amazon's not testing anything that they don't think could become $1 billion opportunity for the most part. None of these have. But I mean, do you think they'll get it right? Or do you think there's just fundamental kind of limitations to what they can if they can kind of have their cake and eat it too in that sense? Yeah.
I mean, I think the drop is an interesting one. I mean, we're participating for the first time as our first brand, like foray into the drop. So for those on the call who don't know what the drop is, it's basically Amazon private label, right? It's a big initiative. Adorable clothing, women's led. It drops for about, they have all these influencers on the platform, and these influencers are how they get a lot of these, like it's like a very special drop, right? So I'm going to launch my Amazon dress, and then, it's for 24 hours, and then you can either buy it or whatnot. So it is kind of like this launch, concept. We're a brand who now they're like, okay, well, you can be put on a private label dress with a sneaker brand. So we're going to test that with them the end of the month. They don't know what they don't know. And what I'm learning is all these betas, have teams of about 3 people.
Yep.
And then they tout it as, oh, I have to take it to the leadership team, and it's 1 person. Yep. So when they test, they learn, they fail fast, right? Or they want to fail fast. So just get on with the new product or project. I think that they will see something that survives. I mean, I will tell you right now, they are very smart in their learnings. So for example, when COVID first hit, we as a team recognized that everyone was working out from home. It's just like, here, consumer behavior, working out from home. We went to Amazon, we said that we want to put in our brand store live, like fitness classes, et cetera. And what they found was that it was so successful, and actually the consumer on their platform was actually more interested, not in product at that time, but in experience, which they've never really been able to figure out, to tell brands, we're not just transactional. We're actually like we're much more than just search. We're browse, and we create these experiences and these services. So I think Amazon has a suite of services. I honestly think that with that learning, other brands are doing like fitness online. I think they're going to expand certain portfolios that will stick. So if they get into fitness and health, right? The American population right now is obsessed with health. It's a huge bubble of what's in health. It's food, it's fitness, et cetera. So I think if they can figure that out, test and learn, I do think something will stick. I don't know how well they will be, because I know there's all these rumors that they're going to just rip off brands and do it themselves. I think apparel, that's more likely. But I think for true brands where you have consumers that have been loyal for years, I don't know how they do that. So I think they're going to continue to test and learn. If they fail fast and they move on. But I guess it's a very roundabout way of answering your question, John. And I know I'm being very gray here, but I think they'll get something right.
Yeah.
And I think that they're finding all these nuggets of learnings on how to create that ecosystem even broader, get the consumer loyalty. And I think that, like fitness, right? That's something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you, Michael, we'll go to you, because I think in a way this kind of comes full circle, which is this concept of ecosystems, that it's not just a store or just a website, or it's not just a place to go buy products. And sometimes I go to the store and sometimes I go to the website. It's also a social app, and it's, a communications platform, and it's a place to buy services, and a place where you can do most of the things that you do as a human and a consumer living in a single kind of company's world. I think in the US, probably Amazon is the closest to that. I know there's some in China that have gone far beyond what Amazon's been able to accomplish. So I guess my question is, can smaller ecosystems live if the world's dominated, or the country that you live in is dominated by 3 or 4 or 6 of these huge global ecosystems? Do other ecosystems exist, or is it just everything gets crowded out by these?
No, absolutely not. So I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but the trick now is learning your offense and defense for those 3 major ecosystems in your home market and globally, while at the same time working on your own scaled down ecosystem. So how do you kind of replicate what they've done? So, let me put it to you this way, and then we'll say this is how you scale down. To understand who Alibaba is right now in China, you would have to imagine that right now, Amazon would have to own Macy's, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, Expedia, the largest cloud system in the world. Wait, they got that already. So I could go on and on and on here. There's about 40 US major entities that Amazon would have to own to start even approaching where Alibaba is on this scale. Okay. And so I don't want to, when we talk about ecosystems, we don't want that to mean just having omni-channel. All right, I'll throw that to you, Sri. And by the way, I am fighting that one C-suite at a time. So I get beat up a lot on it, but so imagine now they have to own all these things I'm mentioning and much, much more to even be who Alibaba is, right? But what that ecosystem has done is, and this is a big differentiator for Alibaba, is it's laid the fertilizer for thousands of other companies to grow up and thrive in that system. And that is, I gotta be careful how I put this, but that's not something that Amazon is built for right now. And so, even something as simple as what we call in China, we call Taobao villages, where Alibaba sent its people and, they installed servers and digital equipment and gave away laptops in these rural areas. And what they ended up doing was seeding a program where, you know, these villages that have been abandoned over the last 30 years for people going to work in the cities. If you were a village that traditionally made, you know, silver teaware or knives or leather garments, they went in and they had their people train the villagers on how to create this. And so what it's done, there's actually 2 million rural businesses who are selling their products globally. This silver tea village I went to it was incredible. It went from one family who revived the business to the whole village now, 30 different families making these products. And so when you look at the live streaming industry in China, when you look at the KOL industry, when you look at the whole TP industry, which we don't have here, right? So Taobao partners, Tmall partners, they're the companies that help you operate in the digital marketplaces in China. So I think a big thing is there, one, you have to think about the scale of what they'd have to own to even look like Alibaba. And number two, it promotes an environment where literally thousands of companies are thriving inside of it. So what does that mean coming back here? I don't believe that Amazon is going to crush every aspect in that, you know, the flowering. So we're going to go back to this, you know, is it the retail apocalypse discussion? John, you've probably heard me say on the stage many times in different environments that there's not a retail apocalypse. What we've had the last 3 or 4 years is a store apocalypse. And when people are using the word store and retail interchangeably, I don't think that's correct. Today, retail is in somewhat of a renaissance. Retail is everywhere now, guys, right? I mean, retail used to be on the high street and on Amazon and a couple of decent .coms. But, you know, I get into an Uber. Well, I haven't gotten into an Uber in quite some time, but, you know, getting into Ubers and having these little mini vending machines in the Uber where you swipe your card and you take out a sandwich and a drink or, you know, a magazine. I mean, retail is everywhere. It's on our, look at it this way, guys. And I think this is what Sri is getting back to, right? The attention span, right, all goes back to this, right? And what's happened here, I'll close with this, is we spend, you know, a lot of science fiction pages thinking about the cyborg future, right? When we'd have these half man, half machines. And I'd argue that we've arrived at the cyborg future, but not quite in the way we'd imagined. And my argument is this: every one of us now operates with 2 hard drives. We have an internal hard drive, and we have an external hard drive. And these 2 hard drives are completely in sympathy with each other now. And so who are we really talking about here, guys? We're talking about the consumer. And we're talking about pieces of real estate that are 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. And the ecosystem lives as much here as it does on the high street and as on this PC I'm talking to.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I could do this for another hour. There's so many different directions I could go. I guess, are there any, we have a couple more minutes before we'll wrap up. Just amazing conversation, guys. Fascinating stuff. Any kind of like burning takeaways from anybody that you know, that you want to get out there?
I'm going to make more of a plea to the CPG industry in general. And this is really for all of you in fast moving consumer brands. So folks, guys and gals, this is your moment. You've waited. If you're, I'm going to use the dirty word e-commerce. I'm sorry, forgive me. If you're in e-commerce, it doesn't matter what function you represent. You could be in supply chain, you could be in finance, you could be in HR. It is your responsibility to the industry now to step up to the plate, challenge your leadership to build a healthy system to deliver what the consumer wants. Their attention is diluted. They're everywhere. You need to follow them. That means your innovation cycle now must be digitally informed with data that's coming from digital retail and consumer browsing habits, which again, we've said attention is everywhere. It is not an excuse any longer for a CMO to not know what a PDP is. And I'm not picking on the CMO. By the same way, it's not okay for a chief supply chain officer to not know what the Amazon chargebacks are, or to not understand why zone 5 shipping of UPS costs significantly more than zone 1 shipping 2-day ground in UPS versus FedEx. This is your moment. Step up and own it like a champion, folks, and challenge your leaders to do the right thing, which is help this industry transform to where it really should have been 5 years ago.
Love it. I love it. I think that's a great place to wrap up. Garrett, do you want to take us home?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, just awesome takes, Michael, Catherine, Sri. I mean, like, I think this is a wonderful way to end our 4 days of sessions, because this really looks forward to what retail is going to be. And I hope everyone in attendance, I'm sure they took notes, because there were so many takeaways that I think really are going to be important moving forward. So, but once again, thank you, Michael, Sri, Catherine, John. Really appreciate your expertise. Thank you, attendees, on a Friday. Thanks for giving us your attention. We're going to be doing more of these, so stay in touch. Connect with us on LinkedIn, through Orca Pacific, or through John's LinkedIn. You can also find our podcast to subscribe to, eCommerce Deep Dive. You can find that on Spotify, YouTube, basically wherever you get your podcasts. So with that, we'll be in touch with a recording, and we want to thank everybody in attendance, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks. You
Bye,
too.
everybody.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
You guys, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of eCommerce Deep Dive. Be sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. And if you get a chance, go in and leave us a rating. It would help a lot. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.